Where did we stop? I guess verse 6, right? You know, it's really funny because I guess you can't understand unless you actually were me and had to do this job, but every week when I put the teaching together, I don't know if I'm going to do 5 verses or 15 or 30, or sometimes it could be a lot of them. So I always make sure I have more than I need, and then I laugh because I make all the effort because I'm worried I'm not going to have enough. I'm like, well, I want to make sure I'm ready, and I didn't even get halfway through this chapter, you know. I did a quarter of what I expected to do in this chapter, so that's fine. It's him, he's in charge, I just am ready for whatever it is. Okay, so praise Yah. So hopefully that was good and useful to you, that it's starting to light some light bulbs up, and yes, good? All right, you can clap. All right, so this is the Afterburn. So if you got comments or questions about the teaching, you can go ahead and raise your hand. Steve's got the mic, he'll come around. If you're on the live stream, you can go ahead and type them in, and Kurt will make note of them on the live stream. Okay, so who has the first? You're gonna flip a coin? Janet and Steve can't figure out who has to go first between the two of them. You went last time, it's her turn? Okay.
Rabbi, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
So with the pruning, when you say cutting away some of the plants, you talk about trials, challenges. I don't know. You know, I see clients, and a lot of times, I don't know if Father uses other people's lives and trials to show us stuff in our own, because I do see things that I hear that are kind of similar to what struggles or things that I go through. Mm-hmm. So is that something that he can?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, it could be time and chance, but it also could be a way for you where he's trying to get you to see something. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a very common problem we have in that we see in others what we can't see in ourselves, even though we have exactly the same problem. Now, of course, if you happen to be interacting with a third party who's not either one of the two, and they can say, oh, well, you guys are the same, you know, okay? Because it's hard. You know, I don't think this will embarrass my wife too much, but there was a time when she had a little struggle with my daughter, and she goes, I don't understand why she's like this. I said, because she's you. I mean, that's what we do, right? Our children are us, but we can't see that, though, okay? And sometimes they're me. So I'm not trying to make it, but whatever it is, you can see them and they're frustrating you doing something, but an outside person could say, but you guys are the same. It's funny that it bothers you when they do it, but it doesn't bother you when you do it, right? And we're all guilty of that. It's so easy for us to see it in someone else and not see it in ourselves. So yes, absolutely, he can do that if you're open to receive. Okay? Of course, the second part of what I spoke to my wife was, and because she's you, you should also be able to figure out how to fix it or work with it because she is you. Okay? She's me also, which means that if you're learning how to deal with me and her, I mean, both children are part her and part me, and part some bizarre thing that came from aliens. Okay? That came from just nowhere. Okay? All of you are laughing because you have children too, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. Oh, I could definitely see where that's me, or that's my husband, or that's me, or that's my wife, and then where did that other piece come from? That doesn't, because we'll be like, is anybody in your family like that? No. Anybody in your family like that? No. Aliens. Okay, so that's just Abba having fun throwing a curveball in there just to mess both of us up. But you all know what I'm talking about, right? I mean, you can see yourself in your children, and you can see your spouse in your children. There's no two ways about that, but sometimes you don't realize that. It's you that you're seeing. Okay? And when you clash with them, a lot of times you're clashing because you're clashing on something you both have the same problem in. Okay? And so that hurts. You know, a father and a son could really be going at it, and the mother's like, because you guys are so similar, and that could be the most offensive thing you could have told both of them. I am not like my, what do you mean I'm like that? Well, but they can see it very clearly. They're watching the two of you go at it, and they, And so like I said to my wife, I said, look, I'm married to you this many years, and I've been the kid's father this long. I said, I know both of you. Now, that wasn't a negative criticism on her. That was to say, look, that's where this is coming from, is that you have to recognize Abba allows our spouses to mirror back to us, our children to mirror back to us, our clients sometimes to mirror back to us, so that we can see ourselves in that, all right? And so the first question you want to ask when you're being frustrated in a relationship is ask yourself, I wonder if I'm that way and I just see it in them. That'd be probably a really good question to ask. Man, that person's driving me crazy. The first question is, I wonder if I'm like that. Do I do those kind of things? Do I do that to other people? Because we have that sort of myopic blind spot where we can see clearly in other people but not in ourselves. All right, Janet?
The last question, Rabbi. You were talking about how he wants us to be us. You were talking about dreams, desires, goals, all that. So thinking about your teaching on making decisions, the reason why you exist. So our Father created us, obviously, and He gave us, like you said, the breath of life with this brain that is wonderful. So He gave us the ability to do all that, to dream, to set goals, to do all that. So that's, I guess, His will for us to have those dreams, to have those goals, to keep trying to,
Look,
be the best.
every one of you, no matter how much you think that you're a goal-seeking creature or not, you have the evidence that you are, because otherwise you wouldn't be sitting here. Because everything you're doing is with the goal of being in the kingdom. And so you're trying to understand how to achieve the goal. What steps do I need to take to get to the achievement of a goal? Okay? And so He planted in us the ability to see forward in time. I'd like to be somewhere in my life at a point that's forward in time. It doesn't exist yet. It hasn't happened yet. But I can see a place that I'd like to be. You're a teenager. You may see yourself wanting to be married. You may see yourself wanting to have children. You may see yourself wanting to have a certain career. Then you have a bubble popping experience, and then you may see yourself wanting to be in a relationship that leads to a forever kingdom. So these are all goals. All right? Okay, who's next? Steve? I forgot. That's right. When Janet. Okay.
All right. All right. I have maybe a few comments that you could talk on here, because in 15:1 it says, "My Father is the gardener," and then you talked about how love, to me, love is. Remember the little cartoon "Love Is" kind of thing that they had back in the paper before. Okay. So to me, love is Torah, and how to demonstrate it is within it, and anything outside of Torah, that love can become perverted. So you want to watch that. And then,
Well said.
And then back to the other part is, yet if love is Torah, then everyone is wanting to decide where the lines are. Then when somebody's not willing to submit to our definition of what it is, we pass judgment, and then we are ready to tell the world how they're not walking as we have set the guidelines. So maybe you could talk about that.
Okay. I think that's a really good point that I kind of hit on, but I didn't make it maybe as clear as I could have. If we do not have structure, we end up in what Steve just described. Each one having their own opinion on what this should look like. And so there needs to be structure to settle the debate, to settle the argument, to settle the conflicts, and say, this is what it should look like. All right? That's what Deuteronomy 17 comes into play. When there are issues you don't know what to do, or there's a conflict and disagreement about what something should look like or how it should play out, you have a structure to go to settle the debate or the confusion or the issue. Okay, otherwise you have, hundreds and hundreds of opinions on what this should look like. Okay, we have, most of the planet knows what Shabbat is. They've heard of it. Okay, it's not something that we have a lot of people on the planet that have never heard of Sabbath keeping or Shabbat. There are those that keep it. Now, of those who don't keep it, I'm sure if you ask them to describe what Shabbat is or what Sabbath is, you'd get dozens and dozens of opinions. Which you might say, well, that's understandable. They don't keep it. What do they know about it anyway, right? Because they've never made the effort to. But what if you went to ask all the people that are Sabbath keepers what it looks like? You're still going to get hundreds of opinions about what's okay and not okay to do. You'll have Sabbath keepers that go to restaurants, Sabbath keepers that don't go to restaurants on the Sabbath, Sabbath keepers that do this, and Sabbath keepers that don't do this. There's going to be hundreds of opinions. 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 There's going to be hundreds of And so this is where we need the structure to help to clarify some of these things. Now, the first thing that we want to do is not do what Steve said at the end there, is we don't want to be judging. Okay, he made a really good point there about that because we see it one way and they see it, the other person sees it a different way, we don't want to judge them like I'm right, you're wrong. What we can do is say, let's go look to the structure and let the structure make a decision. Look for the anointing and the appointing and let that person make the decision. Or bring it to the leadership, let the leadership. There are things you guys bring us that we then bring to the meetings like we have every month, and we talk about them there to have wisdom, iron sharpening iron. Now, ultimately, I have the responsibility to make the decision for this particular group, but we all talk about it, and we all come to a position where we're in agreement, okay? Because part of my job is to bring consensus once the decision is made, to make sure that we all get on the same page, to understand that it's still Deuteronomy 17 and decision has to be made. So excellent point, Steve. Appreciate that. Okay, wait, go back. Rocky's got his hand right behind you.
Well, I always thought pruning was, the way I was raised or the way I believed in the system, was that I think I was getting pruned away every time they call it backslide, but I dove into it. I mean, I dove into it. So, and then I would come back because to me, it was only like the 10 suggestions because they're laws in every country, not to kill and steal and all that. They was, but they're really suggestions because you can do it. And if you get caught, then you pay the price. But your teachings say these aren't suggestions, they're commands. And it's like, wow, they really are. And that's funny. They said they're fulfilled. You can't do them perfect, so why bother? But you really should. And I really did try many a times. But I always ended up thinking, well, nothing's new. It says all things become new, and I'm no different than I've always been. And it doesn't seem no different in here. These people are, to me, the same. We want to be law-abiding citizens. I mean, I never wanted to get caught when I was doing things wrong. I mean, why would you? I was born at night, but not last night. I mean, I'm not that dumb. Well, that's questionable, though.
The day before. Okay.
Yeah, right. But I mean, that really hit home with me. That wow, pruning away. I mean, you're gone deep. I always thought I was getting grafted back in when I went back. Oh, I'm back. It's like, I'm back. I'll try this church. Maybe this is where the truth is. And wow, some of those churches in Little Ohio, I mean, some of those little one-school churches or one-rooms, wow, that was scary. Some of those were really scary. But I'll shut up. Thank you. Did I make any sense?
Some. I did. You made sense, Rocky. I appreciate that. Look, no, you made sense. Let me kind of translate for all of you. So look, the idea is, and I understand where you're coming from with this idea of suggestions versus commandments. Look, the commandments are actually suggestions if you're not in covenant. They are commandments as part of covenant, because the covenant says that what I say should be taken as a command, because you're agreeing to do what I say. So from the relationship, they are commandments. Outside of relationship, most countries have adopted most of those basic understandings into their law because they think they were good suggestions. They were good ideas, that we shouldn't steal or, murder and those kind of things. But in the relationship, that changes into the imperative. There's an expectation that you will do it. Okay, it's not an arguable thing. It's not a suggestion. Hey, I think it'd be a great idea if you guys didn't steal from each other. Oh, no. He says, if you're in covenant with me, thou shalt not steal. Okay? You will keep Shabbat. You will do this. You won't do that in this relationship. So now they're not suggestions. Okay? So it really has to do with the level of relationship. So appreciate that. All right? Now, it's funny because as Rocky was talking, I kind of pictured when he mentioned grafted in, I almost wanted to see this like as a cartoon animation. So here you are getting grafted into the tree, and standing right in front of you as you're grafting in is a guy with a giant, pruning shears, clicking them together like, you ready? Welcome to the tree. kind of Freddy Krueger style, you know. Because it is scary. It's scary to come in, because people think, hey, like he said, hey, I've arrived, I'm grafted in, I'm this and I'm that. No, you should understand, you're not just doing that. You're coming into something, and you need to be ready for all that that brings. I exaggerated and sort of made light of it on one level, but it should be understood. There is a gardener with pruning shears waiting for you when you graft in. And it won't be more than you can take, and it won't hurt more than you can handle, and it will bear the peaceable fruit and all the other stuff. But again, Christianity has painted a picture to you of, if you come in here, nothing will be an issue ever again. There will be no struggles. There will be no, like we're describing with the pruning and all that other stuff. And that's the terrible disservice that they've done to you with that sort of mindset. So it's really, really disempowering, I guess is the best way to say it. It takes away any thought that you actually have to do anything. There's no motivation anymore. All right, next.
I had one more comment you brought up in relationship, though. To me, it would think, and maybe you could talk a little bit more on the building of relationships, because you can come to a point in a relationship where you don't want to take the time and effort needed to go further than if there was a falling out of some kind, and that maybe something happened that you didn't expect the result. So maybe you didn't have the level of relationship you thought you had, so in order to get what you have, doesn't that take more time and effort, and you're going to have the ups and downs in that?
You see that, Rocky? He makes you sound very cohesive. I do. I do love Steve. I actually speak fluent Steve, so it's okay. All right, so that's sort of on topic, off topic, but I'll address it real quickly. Look, the bottom line is that all relationships, I'm going to think about that. Pretty much all relationships are entered into through effort. In other words, you do things to adjust yourself to the other person, to please them, to try to win them over, or whatever it is, whether it's a friendship or a marriage or whatever it is that you're trying to do. You make an effort to figure them out, to do what's pleasing to them. Then you finally get in the relationship and you drop the ball on all of that stuff, and you just assume that now that you're in a relationship, everything just naturally is going to flow. But you forget that it was the effort that brought the relationship into place in the first place. So guys, you're not doing what you did when you were trying to win your wife over. Wives, you're not doing what you did when you're trying to win the guy over. We stop making the effort. The things, the little things, the big things that we did to try to impress the person we end up with. Okay, that's kind of a big problem. Now, that's part of this in some ways too, because, we are not doing things necessarily to impress the Father. But we have to understand that we made an effort to seek, to find, to go, and to get all this. And then we get here and we think we've arrived. We fall back into a Christian mindset and we forget that we have to keep going. Not everybody, but we have those moments. That there's still going to be the challenge. You're going to still learn, if you're listening, every week stuff that you did not understand the way you should before, and that you're going to have to readjust your thinking on, or you're going to hear something that you don't have that issue with, but you realize you've neglected it and not given it the level of attention that it should have, even though it's not new revelation to you, but you realize, wait a minute, I've not given this the right amount of attention or the amount of effort, okay? So that's good. Michelle?
I really like what it says, because I really focus on this a lot. If you stay in me and my words stay in you, you shall ask whatever you wish, and it shall be done for you. In this my Father is esteemed, and that you bear much fruit, and you shall be my taught ones.
Amen.
My question is, I want to say a comment outside this real quick about structure and, where do we get our leadership when there are like so many ways to celebrate Shabbat. Mm-hmm. Like today, I would have never, coming from the Orthodox synagogue, I grew up in a Baptist church, but I would have never on this Sabbath day, say, turn my stove on to heat up my chicken, which I did today because you said in your structure, it was okay to warm it as long as we cooked it the night before, which obviously I did.
Yes.
I wouldn't have done that. But so I was letting you know I did that. Back to what I was going to say about If you stay in me and my words stay in you, you shall ask whatever you wish, and it shall be done for you. In this my Father is esteemed. I guess I ask for a lot of things. I've always prayed. You know, in my 20s, I remember all I ever did was pray on the way to work. I pray that this becomes a miracle in my life. And so I have all these wonderful memories of me and the Messiah having this conversation about how you're going to take this mundane life that I had and turn it into something miraculous. So I totally believe that you can take the most boring of situations, I hate to say it like that, but it's true, and turn it into something fantastical for us, because his Father is esteemed to take us to the next level, to wherever he wants us to go. Nowadays, I ask for things for my house. Like last year, I got a new roof for my house, and I just want to say all praise to esteem to the Father for answering my prayers. I need a new roof. I've had this house for 11 years. Got a beautiful new roof. And then 2 days ago, I was approved for another grant for my house, and these guys just left, and $30,000 worth of central air and heat and all the stuff they insulate your house with, and everything you can possibly imagine. So I've asked for things, and these are big things. These are not little things. And I've gotten everything I've ever asked for. So I have no doubt that when I ask for something even more spectacular, I'm going to get it. And you say we don't have to pray before we ask for something, but don't we have to be in line with his will, so we seek his will to make sure it is something that we can ask for?
Okay. Now, really good question, but I want to answer it partially, because the verses you quoted are coming up soon, and I will cover it very thoroughly next week, because it's the next verses that we're getting to, okay? But I will answer some of the question, because the last part of your question actually had to do with what I talked about today, all right? So let me deal with that part, but I will assure you that we're almost, 2-3 verses away from what you were just reading. So we will get there next week, and we'll cover that part. Okay? And it actually also covers into, again, in verse 16, it talks about it, continuing the idea of asking whatever, we ask that the Father will do. Now, so let's not go into what he does in response to what you ask from that point of view today. I promise we'll cover that next week. The other part had to do, though, with the idea of praying before things and seeking his will in that part. We did talk about that today. I'm not saying that when you really don't know what to do, that you shouldn't pray and seek his will. I didn't say that you don't want to pray, before a big decision for him to maybe show you things that you might be missing in the decision. I'm saying that you have to at least first know what it is that you prefer, that you want, so that that's clear, because often you're going to pray about things that it really doesn't matter to him what color car you get, okay? And so, because I know people literally that they would pray about that, okay? But what I'm saying is, in big decisions in life, you probably should get counsel and pray, because you'll need guidance and stuff. Because you got to remember that when you pray, how do I want to put this so it makes clarity? Praying is very effective and can be completely the opposite as well. Why? Because you have 3 potential voices in your head, and depending on which one you listen to, you could be in more trouble than if you didn't pray. So it's hard sometimes to know which voice is screaming in your head. Is it yours? Is it Hasatan's? Or is it his? All 3 try to convince you they're his. So I'm not saying don't pray. I'm just saying when you pray, you must be careful, because I've had people tell me, oh, I prayed and I got an answer to prayer, and they got in all kinds of mess because of what they thought they heard, because it was the wrong voice they were hearing. Anybody know what I'm talking about? You don't have to raise your hand. Okay? All right? Okay, Rocky put up both hands. Okay, so, but you know what I'm talking about. And they say, the Ruach told me, and I knew, and the Father told me, and then they're off in some disastrous thing that really wasn't of the Father, okay? So what you want to do is you want to pray and get guidance, okay? Pray and seek guidance. So I'm not saying don't pray. Absolutely, it tells you to pray. I was talking specifically about, but pray already at least knowing what you would prefer. I go to the Father and say, Father, I'm leaning in this direction. This is kind of what I'd like to do, or where I think I should be going. And please show me if there's any reason that should not be what I should be doing. Okay? That's a different way to approach it. Father, show me, is there something I'm missing that I'm not seeing that's a reason not to go in this direction, not to make this decision? But yet I've already thought it through, figured it out, got the research done, got all the information I think that's necessary to make a good decision, and I'm ready to now make that decision. So I know what I want. And then I go before him and say, okay, I've done the research, this is what I'm thinking of doing, is there anything that I'm not seeing? Please reveal it to me. Have somebody come up and talk to me, whatever it is. Have some way of letting me know this is probably not the thing I should do. Otherwise, this is where I'm going. And so I'm asking does that make sense now how I'm putting it? Okay? But remember, he puts you here because he wants to see what you want, what you desire, how you handle your desires, whether you allow your desires to interfere with his desires, which is really what you're talking about. So you should know what his desires are, but his desires have nothing to do with the type of house you live in, what city you live in necessarily, and all these other things. You can accomplish all of this in any type of housing in any city. But you may say to him, I've been praying, I want more fellowship, and then you find this here in Cleveland, Tennessee, and now you're not sure what to do. Well, I don't know, you asked for this. Oh, but then I have to leave all this other stuff. Well, be more specific in what you ask. Father, I want what I want, but I don't want to have to leave where I'm living. Okay, well then maybe he'll start a congregation there for you or something. But you gotta have to be more specific, okay? So just bear that all in mind. So did that answer the question, at least that half of your question? Okay, I will answer the other half. The other half is a very good question too, but we'll cover that in the next part, because we're gonna definitely go, the questions you're asking basically start in, let's see, if you stay me, okay, so that's really verse 7, so we really get into that right next, okay? So we'll definitely get into that next week. All right, next question. Okay, Joffrey?
Hello, Rabbi. I'm kind of all over the board right now. In the scriptures, it says, stay in me. And I'm used to the word abide. First question, what's the biblical definition of abide? The next thing I noticed, it is a commandment for us to love. He says that. Yeshua says, this is my commandment. Love one another as I have loved you. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then I started thinking about 1 John chapter 3. And John, again, he's more pragmatic in his description of what that love looks like.
All right, but that's coming up the next part of the part after, so hold that thought. Well, because you're jumping like 3-4 verses ahead.
Yeah, and so
we'll get there.
I'm just dancing around because all these things are popping up in my head. And,
well, that's where you need the patience part of the fruit to wait till next week.
I'm working on that.
Or the week after.
Humor me for one moment.
I am using as much humor as I have. They're all laughing.
I see that. Okay, so would Jeremiah 24:7 connect in any way to what was just taught when he says, I will cause them to have a heart for me, and I will cause them to have a heart for me, and I will put
I shall give them a heart to know me, that I am Yahweh, and they shall be my people, and I be their Elohim. Okay? So, but the main thing is, it says, the reason this is going to happen is because they're going to turn back to me with all their heart. Okay? In other words, they're going to have to realize what I want, I wasn't accomplishing going in this direction. To get what I want, I have to go there.
Correct.
Okay?
And you spoke of, he has to pop our bubble.
Yep.
And so...
Because it takes a little bit of a bubble popping for you to realize that where you're going isn't actually going to get you where you want to go.
Because we can mechanically do things, but until the heart changes, like David said, create in me a clean heart. I will cause them to have a different heart, etc. Until that happens, it doesn't matter. That heart has to change for me to continually want to remain in and abide in his love and be like him in love towards my fellow brethren. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, look, it'd be like until you get the bubble popped, you're driving up and down on 75 or 85 or 95, thinking you're going to end up in California. When these roads just go north and south, okay? And then what you do is you jump off of 75 and you get on 85 and think, okay, that'll work. Nope. And then you get on 95 and that'll work. Nope. And you keep going on these wrong roads that none of them head west. They only go north and south. And you're thinking, why am I not getting there? And the bubble finally bursts and says, well, because you're going north and south and north and south. You need to go west. Okay, if you want to go to some place that's west. So that's part of the bubble bursting, is that you keep doing things, thinking that you're going in the right direction, but you don't seem to understand that you're not, because it seems like I'm making forward progress, we're driving, but you're not going in the right direction. You're never going to get there driving on that highway. Remember, he says, I am the way. If you're on the wrong path, you're not going to end up in the right destination. Okay? Now, I appreciate for all of you, this is a lot in this chapter that we're going to cover. Okay, so just be patient. We're going to get to it. We didn't even cover all of everything in those first 6 verses, so I may go back and finish. We expounded on much more deeply. We have a little bit more to do with verse 6. We didn't really cover hardly at all, okay? So this idea of being thrown in the fire and everything else. So we'll cover starting in verse 6 really and go forward, next week. But we will get to the things you're talking about, which are a little bit further down, the things that Michelle was talking about a little further down. Okay, just be patient with it, I promise you. And if I don't, you can ask it during that Q&A Afterburn, and we'll make sure to cover it. Okay, but I want to first lay out the teaching part about those verses so that, it makes more sense. Okay, Richard?
Thank you, Rabbi. This is a great chapter, but Rocky touched on it, and you used the word imperative. And when I look at verse 4, it says, stay in me, comma. And I think that should be a standalone sentence, because he's talking to us who have at least made a commitment to be in a relationship. That should have an exclamation point or something more. That's very direct. There's no ambiguity. Yeah.
Right. There's an imperative there. There's right. He doesn't just say, hey, I think it's a good idea if you stay in me. He's saying, stay in me.
But then he goes through and he keeps saying that over and over and over again.
Because he knows our tendency is to get, because of self-sovereignty and our own desires, to be drawn in different directions. See, that's why your desires are not the problem in itself, the idea of having desires. You must desire him more. If you desire him more, it then subjugates all your other desires to that bigger desire. Okay?
Right, and then, and I'm sure you're going to cover this some more, but in verse 6 it is, if anyone does not stay.
Right.
So that could be a run-on sentence. I'm not an English major, but if you made a run-on sentence out of that and put totally imperative in there, that's like a command. Not to be confused with the commandments, but it's direction, I guess.
Well, I mean, look, verse 6 is, look, a lot of what's in this chapter is to help you understand cause and effect. Consequences of choices. If you stay in me, you can expect all these things. If you don't, this is what you can expect. Okay? But the consequences also being linked to the idea that you have a choice. You have a free will. Let me just jump back to Joffrey for a second, because I realized I didn't answer the other part of your question, which was between stay in me versus abide. Okay? I don't have the Hebrew in front of me, nor the Greek. Okay? The Hebrew, of course, this wasn't written in Hebrew. Well, I'm not saying it wasn't originally, but we don't have any Hebrew originals there. But the Greek I could look into to see what the Greek says. The idea, though, is, look, abide means to dwell in or to live in. Okay? Abide in me. Live in the context of me. Okay? But you could choose to go live somewhere else. So stay in me and abide in me have a similar enough context. Okay? Because the idea is, I'd rather you actually took both words and combined them. Stay and live in the context of me. Because stay in me, expecting you to bear fruit, means you're going to live in the context of him. So that is implied in the word stay. And abide has implied in it the idea of staying. So one implies abiding, the other implies staying. Does that make sense now? All right, so excellent question to stir up so I could say that point. Okay, Betty?
Thank you, Rabbi. When you were talking about pruning, the thing that came to my mind is when we lived in Arizona, we had a huge lemon tree. And at the bottom of the tree, these sucker branches would come off. They look like real branches, but they would never bear any fruit. And what they did is they drained the other branches from bearing good fruit. So you had to cut them off. And so I'd look at it this way. We all have, I know I do in my life, sucker branches that I don't necessarily always see that need to be pruned so my fruit can grow. And
Because
then
they're draining you.
Yeah, because they're draining me
Right.
from doing things.
Right.
And so when Yahweh prunes those, sometimes it's painful because it could be family, it could be friends, it could be anything in our lives that just takes us away from following Yahweh. And I was just wondering if that is a thought that is true and right.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Absolutely. I think we can all recognize that those are things in our life. The challenge is it's hard to choose to cut off or extract people out of your life, that are toxic to your life, that are hindrances in your life, because you still care about the people, you love them. They were in a different level of relationship with you when you were in a different place, all right? But you have to understand that a change of status changes all relationships. It was very interesting for my wife and I, for example, when we first got married, how all of a sudden a lot of our single friends were just not as friendly as they used to be because we were no longer them. And forget about the walk or anything else. We were all walking the same walk at that time. Our friends and us were all walking in the same church or whatever it was and all that. But somehow they started acting a little different to us because we were not single anymore. So you're now walking differently. You now have lost a commonality with the people that are in your life. And sometimes that means that those relationships are going to change. They need to diminish on some level or whatever it is. It's not that you're shunning people because you're above them or something else. You just recognize that where you're going, they are an anchor or a drag to where you're trying to go. And so you need to remove that. Now, remove it doesn't mean you never interact with them. It means that you change the level of interaction, change the boundary settings that you have between you and them. We all should have boundary settings in all of our relationships. Greater ones or lesser ones, depending on how intimate the relationship, right? So you may just have to go into your, software, so to speak, and reset your boundaries with people. Okay, I still have a relationship with you, but we now have a different boundary than we had before. Right? If you're a woman and you had a bunch of guy friends and now you're married, guess what? New boundaries have to be in place. You can't just have all those guy friends. Same thing for the guy. You were a guy, you had a lot of women friends, and now you're married, you have to change your boundaries. And sometimes people think, well, I don't know, I've always been friends with all these people. Yeah, and your wife doesn't like seeing you interact with them on Facebook and messaging them and everything else. You need new boundaries, okay? So you need to change those things and change the settings, And that's not a negative against them. It's just a change of status requires a change of boundaries. Okay, who's next? Okay, Rick?
Yeah, when you were covering Joffrey's question on stay versus abide, a thought came to my mind. Stay could just be like a casual thing. I'm just going to hang out here. It's like a job. You can just show up and put in your time, or you can be a dedicated employee and you're giving your 100%. Where abide means, you're there to do something. You're there intentionally for a purpose, and you're 100%, you're all in.
All right, so that is absolutely true what he said, but understand that stay in the context of being a branch in him, and he's the vine, and you're being nourished and fed, and you're supposed to bear fruit, all turns that stay into an abide. Okay, because that stay is in the context of what he just said. Okay? So well said, but just so you understand that if the word stay had not had the rest of the context, I could see where there could be more confusion. But because that stay was in the context of this is where you're being fed, I'm the vine, et cetera, now bear in mind, this is already after John 14, chronologically, where he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He's already told them some things that lead into John 15. It has a flow from what he just said. And bear in mind that there is no ending point from John 14 to 15, like a week went by. It's the same conversation. So he had just made it clear to them, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And now I'm also telling you, let me give you another picture of it. Picture it in the picture of a vine and a garden with a gardener and branches and fruit. So I give you another way to see it. So excellent way of putting it, but just so you can see that the word stay in this context, which is really why it's important that we always try to seek out context, because without it, you would miss the point. And so you may not understand, well, what's the difference between abide and stay? Well, here it's trying to make the same point, okay? Stay in a level of abiding. In other words, don't just stay here and do nothing. Don't just, abide here and do nothing. You have to actually be feeding off the vine and bearing fruit. All right, next. Okay, Rocky.
Isaiah chapter 5, the first 7 verses. Can that be tied in there somehow?
Okay, so that whole beginning of the chapter, I'm sure we can find a way to tie it in, because it's all about using the vineyard as a metaphor, okay? The time for me to then read it and connect it together is not available. But I would tell you, yes, I'm sure that the prophet is being given an idea and vision of understanding the vineyard metaphor, okay, in that chapter at the beginning. So that was good connection there, but we're not gonna have time to kind of read through and break it down. It's not as simple as sometimes when people ask me to check references. But in my first quick look at it, I would say I'm sure there are connections there. Okay, who's next? Okay, live stream.
First one goes, great teaching as always, Rabbi. What if at some point on this journey, our actions don't match up with our heart? Is this a moment of pruning that is happening until the next stage of pruning?
Probably. That's probably a way I guess you could put it. Look, there's going to be moments, okay, I got to figure out how sometimes to word things. There's going to be moments in your life on a regular basis where you're lacking congruence, okay, where your heart and your actions are not synchronized in a congruent way, okay? So you might do certain things, all right, knowing that they're the right things to do, but your heart's not in it, okay? Or you may be doing things that you're starting to let go of, which is good that your heart's not in it and you're now going in a different direction. So there's going to be those moments where you're not congruent, where your heart and your actions are aligned perfectly. Now, hopefully over time, more and more of your time is spent where they're both in line, okay? So hopefully that kind of answered that question or addressed it. Next.
All right, next one. When Yahweh's commands seem difficult to follow, does that mean you aren't staying in Him, like you're performing by your own power?
Yes. I mean, that's not maybe, I don't want to simplify that to say that's the only reason, but that's part of what's going on there. Okay, nothing that Yahweh asks you to do is difficult. It's only difficult in the context of where we are. Okay, in your family, in your community, in your whatever upbringing and stuff, that's the only thing that makes it hard. It's not hard to eat right. It's not hard to keep different days for holy days. It's not hard to keep Sabbath instead of Sunday. Nothing is hard, but it can be if your boss threatens to fire you if you keep something, or if your family members keep bringing stuff unclean into your house. These are what makes it hard, okay? So always remember that Yahweh's commandments there's not a single one of them that's hard. What's hard is trying to do it in the context of a world that's not covenanted, okay? Next question.
Yeshua said if someone loves him, they should keep his commandments. The implication being that if someone doesn't love him, it profits him nothing to keep his commands. Is that correct?
No. Okay? What Yahweh says is right is always right, and what's wrong is always wrong. And so doing what's right always benefits on some level, and not doing what's right or doing what's wrong always brings a consequence. However, we're now talking about a relationship. So when he says, if you are in relationship with me, doing these things benefits the relationship. If you're not in a relationship with me, doing these things still may benefit, but has nothing to do with the relationship. All right? Most of the world has rules that say murdering is a bad thing and not allowed and illegal and whatever you want to call it. Same thing with stealing or committing adultery and all these other things. There are laws against those things. There are laws to help make sure that a proper day's wage is paid to a proper day's work. There's laws about all kinds of things. That doesn't mean that obeying those laws instantaneously or in any way has anything to do with your relationship with Yeshua or with the Father. Okay? They're just laws that we could say that almost every culture has come up with similar laws, some of the main bigger laws. But when you do them in the context of covenant, it's a relational thing. Because now you're not doing it because you think it's right. You're doing it because he thinks it's right and you trust him. You see the difference? Doing a commandment because you agree and think it's right. Remember we talked about the idea of submission? If you agree and think it's right, then it's not submission. See, when we do it because of submission, now it's relational. If we do it because we actually agree with it and like it, then it's not necessarily relational. That doesn't mean doing it because you agree and you're in relationship, it doesn't have any benefit. But I'm just saying is you have to put it in the full context. So when he says, if you love me, guard my commands, well, if people guard his commands and don't have a relationship with him, that doesn't mean that it still won't benefit them in some way. And it benefits others. If you're not stealing, it benefits everybody around you, whether or not you have a relationship vertically or not. And if you're not murdering people, it benefits people around you. If you're not committing adultery, that benefits people around you. If you're not coveting, that benefits people around you. So, let's look at it from that point of view. Next.
All right, so there seems to be number of questions there that they want to clarify what is bearing good fruit. I got one comment that says, so bearing fruit is not necessarily actively witnessing to others, and there's others along those lines.
Oh, okay, now we're back into Christianese thinking or Christianized thinking. Actually, that was a question that came out last night in the discussion that we had with the people on the other side of the world here with the idea, what do I mean when I say Christianese? It's a mindset, it's phrases and words that we use that Christianity has turned into what they don't really mean. So when you talk about bearing fruit, if you're thinking about that from a Christianized point of view, you may think of that as meaning going out there and evangelizing and going to save souls or soul winning or whatever that is. That's bearing fruit. And that's not what it's talking about here. Okay, bearing fruit simply means that in doing the things that he says to do, we are transforming and becoming more Yeshua-like. So we are mechanically doing correct things and developing as a fruit of that more joy, love, joy, peace, patience, etc., the fruit of the Spirit. Okay? And so those are the kinds of things. So what is bearing fruit? I've taught you that the correct day to worship and to praise and to come before him is Saturday, is the Shabbat, and you bear fruit by coming and showing up and keeping Shabbat. So fruit, think of it like when James says, I will show you my belief through my actions. So bearing fruit is the action that comes from the understanding. That's all. Remember we talked about knowledge is not power, it's potential power. Because you can have all the knowledge in the world and not do anything with it. It has no power. So what he's saying is you could be in the vine, you could show up on Saturday even, hear this taught all the time, or even just be at home listening to teaching, so you have all this information, you read your Bible, you know what it says, and yet you don't do any of it. Or there's huge pieces of it that you don't do. So that's where the fruit is. The fruit is that you heard it, you learned it, you understood it, and you did it. Okay? So when I talk about the four things the teachings are supposed to accomplish, the first thing is that you understand it so that you do the second thing, which is bear fruit. I call it so that you do it. So we can change that to understand it so that you bear fruit. What fruit? Depending on what you're talking about. If we're talking about Sabbath keeping, we're talking about keeping the Sabbath. We're talking about feast keeping, we're talking about keeping the feast. We're talking about tithing, we're talking about tithing. We're talking about love and Torah, how you love him and how you love each other. It's going to be that you're doing what you've learned to do. So bearing fruit Just think of it as the action connected to the information that the vine has fed you with. Okay? So that action is going to depend on what piece of information you're talking about that you're being fed by the vine.
I can hear you.
So when you're talking about, for example, relationships, like marriage relationships, we have a teaching on marriage. So then you apply what you learned. Okay, we have all these teachings about all these things. What about forgiveness? Well, you can learn all about it, but then you have to apply it. That's bearing fruit. Okay? Whatever the teaching may be, look at any of the information that you have, all the teachings that you have, the bearing fruit is simply the action you take. Next.
All right, let's see. When we are being pruned, is that the baptism as far as that we're going through? Will that also include relationships with others that may suffer while going through it?
Yes. Okay?
Right.
Oh, look, and let me just go to all of you, again, with the bearing fruit. Sometimes I go back, I know. If you're working with your child and you're trying to get them to do something or stop doing it, and you've been working with them, and then you find them off on their own and they actually did or responded the way you've been working with them, that's bearing fruit. Do you see what I'm talking about now? That's an example, okay? You've taught your child how to respond to a situation that normally they might get real upset about or get real frustrated with, and you're working with them so that they don't respond that way, and now you see them going through something that normally would trigger that, and it doesn't. And you're thinking, wow, that's the fruit of your efforts to get them to get to that place. So you see, the training, the information, in action is the fruit. Okay, next.
All right, so as far as our motivation and our hearts desiring a relationship with Abba above all else, do you have advice for people who struggle with this, and maybe for those who have been in this walk for a while?
Read it one more time because I'm pretty sure I know what I want to say, but just read it again.
As far as our motivation / our hearts desiring a relationship with Abba above all else,
Yeah.
do you have advice for people who struggle with this, maybe for those who have been in this walk for a while?
All right, so any of you that have ever done any motivational speaking training or listened to speakers out there, this should be a simple one for all of you, so you'll recognize my answer right away. Everything that has to do with motivation has to do with one thing and one thing only: why. Okay? If you lack motivation, you don't have a very strong why. Now, this is a little challenging with what we're doing because our why is something we can't see, can't touch, can't taste. I mean, it's a concept, it's an idea, a future living forever in a kingdom that doesn't exist yet, where people are living under Yeshua's rule, etc. I mean, we have a why that's a little tough. In other words, doing what you have to do to go out there and hit it hard because your why is a house of a certain size and a certain thing, that's a why. You can get a picture of it, you can put it up on a board, look at it every day and be motivated. That's my why. I want that house, so I'm willing to work 2 jobs and this and this and this, whatever it is, right? You can have a why. So when you ask this question, the reason that we struggle to do these things with all our heart, with all our might, with all our being is because we don't have a strong enough why to do it. You don't want it bad enough because you don't have a strong enough reason to want it bad enough. So I would say that your biggest problem, and I say this a lot lately, the answer to most problems is doing what? Bringing reality into the situation. There's some things about your why that are not real enough to you. This world being what it is isn't real enough to you. The place that you end up as far as life in nothingness at the end where in other words, this is all there is, isn't real enough to you that you might want to avoid that. The reality of the kingdom that's coming and forever and all of the wonderful things that are going to, go listen to the Millennium and Kingdom teaching. Get excited about what that future might hold. Okay? But your why is the problem. See, your why might have been like, well, I don't think I'd like to die. I'd like to live forever. Okay, whatever. If that's the level of your why, you need a bigger stick to scare you or a bigger understanding of what you want or what you would get as your carrot to chase after. Look, this is why the Catholic Church brought you the going to heaven and running from burning in hell thing. They used that as the carrot and the stick. It doesn't match up with Scripture at all, but they used it as a great way to scare the whatever out of people to motivate them. Mostly they used the stick more than the carrot, all right? Because it really wasn't something that motivated a whole lot of people to be up in heaven strumming a harp, just whatever, okay? But they were afraid of the stick. They were told that they would be tortured and burned and all these other things forever and ever. And that motivated people pretty good. Okay? And so he doesn't use that. He's not going to scare you into wanting to what he has. And he's not going to just, overwhelm you and wow you. He's going to give you enough to say, can you believe? Can you have faith? Can you see what I'm trying to offer you? Can you reach in and imagine and envision what I'm talking about here? And can you want that bad enough to do the things that are necessary? But you have to have the level of vision to generate the strong enough why. So whoever asked that question, this applies to everything in your life that you're not getting done, that you want to get done on some level. The reason you're not getting it done is because you don't want it bad enough. And the reason you don't want it bad enough is because your why that you should want it, the why that's driving it, isn't big enough. So when you set goals, okay, my goal is to be in the kingdom. My goal is to transform into Yeshua. You need also to know why you're wanting the goal. So good goal setting, whenever I do goal setting, one day we'll do some goal setting, classes here or whatever. One of the major steps in goal setting is not just writing them down, but writing down why it's important that you achieve it. Why do you want whatever it is that you want? And if it's big enough and clear enough and you focus on it, you'll do what's necessary to get there. It's a matter of the why, all right? Okay, so there's like the old proverb about it, and I think every religion sort of has this proverb. Yeah, the Jews talk about the person goes to find the rabbi, and the rabbi's, he says to the rabbi, I want to understand whatever it is from a Jewish point of view. And the rabbi, is like, all right, whatever, and keeps putting the guy off, and he says, Rabbi, really, I want to learn this stuff. And so he takes him out in the water, pushes him under the water, and holds him under there. And the kid doesn't know what's going on, so he's just hanging out under there. Then all of a sudden he realizes he's still being held under there, and he's not being allowed up. Until finally he starts kicking and pushing and whatever he needs to do until he finally gets up. He goes, what was up with that? The rabbi says, look, when you want whatever it was he was asking for as bad as you just wanted to breathe, you'll figure it out, okay? You'll make the effort that's necessary. Okay, some of you spend all of your life up to this point just maybe above the broke line where you're just barely paying your bills and everything else. And the reason that that's your life is because you haven't hated that enough to do something different. Oh, but I don't know what to do. But you would figure it out if you wanted to bad enough. Do you understand what I'm saying? Whatever it is in your life that you've been struggling with and have never fixed, you've not fixed it because you've never wanted to fix it bad enough. If you wanted to fix it bad enough, you'd figure it out. But you took the easier path because you didn't want it bad enough. I like when the Olympics comes around. It's all pagan, this, blah, blah, blah. I get that. But I like to see what a human being is capable of if they want something bad enough. How they'll discipline their body and their lives and their behavioral structures to accomplish one single focused goal. But that's the only way you get to be there and be one of the top 3 getting a medal, is to have totally focused your life on one single goal. And if you want to really get the best, now this is the part I never watch, but my wife likes to watch, which is the stories. But I recommend you watch the stories because you can hear the willingness that this person had to sacrifice family, friends, social life, everything to accomplish their goal. Take that and say, do I feel that way about getting in the kingdom? Do I make that kind of effort? Okay? Look, I knew people that were never going to be in the Olympics, but they wanted to compete on a state level with swimming. I was on the swim team in high school, okay? And the guys who were the best in our swim team, they got up early in the morning, went to the Y, swam in the morning, went to school, then swam again in the afternoon with the swim team, twice a day, several miles a day of swimming, because they wanted what they wanted. What are you willing to do? Well, I'm tired of being fat. Okay, so eat different and exercise. Well, you know that already, but do you eat different and exercise? No. Well, then you don't want it bad enough. I'm tired of being broke. But you're still working the same jobs, doing the same thing. So you're really not tired of these things. It's just an annoyance. If you were tired of it, you'd fix it. Oh, I don't know how to fix it. Figure it out. I told you this a couple of weeks ago. You need to be the expert. You need to be expert at whatever it is you struggle with. I struggle with anger, then learn and be an expert at what it takes to fix that problem. I struggle with this, finances, then become an expert in finance. I struggle with this in my health, well, then become an expert in the thing that you need. That's a lot of work. So what? I swear we are the laziest bunch of beings on the planet. My point is simple. Fix it or stop whining about it. I don't know what to do. Then ask somebody who does. And then here's a concept. Do what they tell you. It's not that complicated. But you have to want it. So if there's anything, that, and I can relate to this, I've been wanting to lose weight for a long time. I've seen some of the sideways angles the camera catches me at. And I look like I'm about 5 months in. And I was a personal trainer, so it's not like I don't know what to do. So by the way, that's just to prove the point that knowing what to do is not the problem. See, I'm a branch not bearing fruit when it comes to that stuff. I've already got the information. I know exactly how to eat right. I know exactly how to exercise. I used to train people to do those things. So why am I still like this? Because I don't want it bad enough. What does bad enough mean? Willing to pay a price. There's a price to pay for what you want. You have to give up other things for what you want. If I want to do what I need to do for this, I'll have to eat differently. I'll have to exercise differently. It's really not complicated. Doesn't require advanced knowledge of science to understand that regulating what you put in your mouth and moving your body are the only things necessary to get yourself in shape. Now, there's lots of different ways you can go about that. So become an expert. Figure out what works for you and what you're willing to do and what can actually get it done. But if you want to be in the kingdom, which is what the question had to do with, then you need to be motivated to do the things necessary. Desire is all that's necessary. You have to want it bad enough. You don't want it bad enough. Anything in your life that you don't have is only because you don't want it bad enough. Because everybody out there that has what you don't have wanted it more than you did. It's the only difference. If you wanted it, you could have it. Because wanting it will generate the movement towards learning what's necessary and doing what's necessary to have it. Okay? Go ahead, clap for that. Every motivational success person out there, millionaire, whatever it is that's out there with whatever it is you think you want and they have it, they all say the exact same thing. If you were willing to do what I do, you could have what I have. That's all there is. It's not like they found some unique ability that nobody else can have. They were willing to do. It may be willing to take a risk. You're not willing to take risk. It may be willing to put in, 80 hours a week when you're only willing to barely work 40. It may be, who knows what, it may be willing to take classes and study books. Do you know that the most successful people out there do not watch Netflix, do not watch television, do not watch the news all day long. They read books all the time. Okay? They do a lot of things you are not willing to do. They don't play video games. They're spending all of their time working on what it is they're wanting. So work on what you want, and guess what you'll have? What you want. Well, I didn't want all this. Well, no, you wanted the things that yielded the fruit. The fruit of eating the stuff that I eat and not moving my body like I need to do at 57 years old is this. That's the fruit of it. That's not a joke. It's just, that's what it is. You look in the mirror and say, I built this. This is the house I built. You did. You made choices that ended up in that is what you have. Oh, but my metabolism. Well, then work with other people with your same metabolism, figured out how to get themselves where they wanted to be. Oh, but I was raised in the whatever financial negative, whatever. Well, people just like you figured out how to fix that too. Whatever you've got going on, people out there figured out how to fix it. Well, I was married and my husband wrecked everything, blah, blah, or my wife wrecked. There are people that had the same situation and figured out how to fix it. Go find out how they did it. And then do the same. Every day there are people making thousands and thousands and thousands doing online businesses. There's also thousands and thousands of people that claim they started one or tried to start one and failed. But do you know how many times those people that were successful tried, started, failed, didn't know what they were doing, tried, started, failed? See, are you willing to do? I'm just giving you one example. Well, I want to work out of the house, but I don't know what to do. So go figure it out. Become an expert. Most of the people, when you read their stories, and that's what you really should do, is go listen and read stories of people that have become from nothing to something, and find out that they started out nothing like you in that area. They didn't start out all privileged, most of them. They started off broke and nothing. And they went and figured out how to become whatever the something is they wanted to be. Okay? You can do this, but only if you want it bad enough. You have to want it bad enough. This is not like genius level education necessary. You just have to want it. If you need the genius level education, if you want it bad enough, you'll go get it. Oh, I can't afford school. You'll find a different way to go get it. You'll learn to be creative. You can go get it, whatever it is. Amen? All right. We could probably end with that. Go ahead.
Question is, at what point are we supposed to be able to stop facing the temptations and stay entirely on track in Yahweh's nature? I understand we cannot be perfect, right?
Okay, you answered your own question. We can't be perfect. We can only want to be perfect and make an effort. He expects us to fall short, okay, but he expects us to learn from our mistakes and eliminate some of those falling shorts, and then we still have other ones that will, either new ones will come up or other ones that we still struggle with. You know, Paul says he had the thorn in his side that just never went away. We all have those kind of metaphors of the thorn in our side, that one area that we struggle in more than the other areas. Because there were some things that when you learned about them, you fixed them and you changed them, and it was never been a struggle since. Other things, it's tough. The whole point is he wants to see you not quit and make the effort. He wants to see you make the effort and not quit. All right? So what point does that all finally get to? I don't know, Revelation 21 when it's all done. Maybe sometime before that, but Revelation 21 when it's all done. Okay? New heaven, new earth, new Jerusalem, etc. All right, next.
Sure if this is on topic, but in the vertical alignment, is the husband viewed basically as Yeshua to the wife, meaning women hold responsibility to maintain relationship?
No. I'm not sure exactly where that was going, but I think the answer would probably be a no. Look, this can be a challenge really badly for the men. When I talk about vertical structure, you must always be thinking that the higher up you go in structure, the more you become the servant girding your loins and washing feet. The men keep thinking of structure as somehow putting them in authority and I'm elevating in some way. Okay? See, I'm highest up in this structure right now. You know what that means? I had to give up my time at an Erev Shabbat meal with friends to go make sure to do a live stream on a Zoom conference. I had to give up my Tuesday nights. I got to give up that's what I have to do. It doesn't become about me. It becomes less and less about me and more about everybody else, the higher the responsibilities get in my position. And so some of you men are starting to think, oh, so stop thinking about what she has to do. Think about what you have to do. Okay? She needs to worry about what she has to do. Okay? Own your role and flourish in that role. Well, if you don't know what that looks like, then you need to be under another man. By the way, if you are looking at yourself as Yeshua in the vertical, then you need someone like me to be the gardener. You got a bunch of men out there, they're all excited about hierarchy in their house and they're not under anybody. You need to go get under somebody. You need a man in your life who can smack you around until you knock it off. Yeah, you can clap for that too. If there is no man in your life that can tell you knock it off, you are flying out there without a net on a tightrope and you're going to crash and burn. You need someone you respect who can speak in your life and say, hey, you're wrong here. And so your wives are praying that you'll do that. And then you stubbornly don't do that. But you need that. Because you've mistaken what authority is all about and what the purpose of it is. The more humble is the expectation, the higher up. The less pride, the less ego, the more you girding yourself up and serving others and washing feet and being there for. The more you remember the whole kind of picture I gave you of the above and the below was also the giver and the receptacle. If you are looking to receive, stop acting like a feminine husband. We've got a bunch of female husbands out there because you want to receive. Stop that. If you're even thinking about what you need to get out of it, you're thinking about it wrong. You want to be Yeshua-like, it's all about giving. Now, the woman is there to receive all that you have for her. And then she can transform too. And then she gives to the children or she gives to the other ladies when she works with the younger ladies as she gets older. There's things to do. But you have to become the receiver first. So men, you need to have someone to receive from. Who can speak into your life and tell you, hey, and by speaking to your life, I'm not talking Christianese where, see, again, I use these terms and I know that they don't mean the right things to you guys. So it's not like the person saying, oh, I have a message from the Father for you. Not that kind of speak in your life. I mean, a person who you can go to and say, actually, you're wrong. You need to stop that. Someone who can correct you. Someone who you can talk to and get an honest opinion and you'll value their opinion even if you don't like what they say. Someone you can submit to. That's what I mean by speak. I don't mean someone that would walk up to you and just insert themselves. Someone you go to and say, hey, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing here. I need somebody to look at what I'm doing and tell me what I'm doing. Is it okay? That's what I'm talking about. So that question, I don't know who said it, so please don't get offended, whoever said it. Because sometimes these people on the live chat think I can see the chat. Or they think I go back and read it. I don't. You do not know my life if you think I have time to do that. Especially if you knew that I won't even read a text message that has to go more than one screen. I'm certainly not reading through 4 hours of chat. Okay? Not happening. Now, so hopefully that makes some sense. Guys, don't expect anything out of your wives if you're not doing your part. Do your part. Own your part. I mean, sure, you can have your expectations, but don't be all disappointed with them when you're probably disappointing them and him, the creator, because you're not understanding what you're supposed to be doing. Well, I'm the man. Well, then act like one. Well, you think you are. Well, from whose perspective? That's really what it comes down to. Culturally, maybe you are. Scripturally, maybe not. Okay? All right, go ahead.
Last question. It's more of a general talk. So how in the world do I abide and stay and do what's expected when I'm in a marriage for 40 years? I never picked up a Bible except maybe to move it from one place to another, and there's no group that does as you do, goes off only Bible covenant. There's nobody to come together and study or anything else.
Okay, so we have done here, I'm assuming this person at least is a little familiar with our ministry, but as you get more familiar with it, you'll understand. We have made every effort to fill all the things that you just talked about. We cannot necessarily just put a congregation where you live, but we do the virtual congregation like we're doing now, which affords you the ability to even ask questions. We also have, in addition to that, we've got counseling that you can get by calling. We've got, 1,700 YouTube videos or whatever it is that you can watch and get instruction from, and then also call and get questions answered about the things that you're watching. We have the Marco Polo groups, which is a way for you to interact with each other on a regular enough basis. We do all kinds of things that meet those needs, if sometimes maybe not ideally, but they are still being met. So you have to now decide how much of this are you going to take advantage of and make use of. Okay? We have stuff available to you. So no, you're not going to necessarily have people there physically where you live to go get together and Bible study together, which is probably good because you'd have the blind leading the blind anyway and you'd get in trouble. I'm serious. I'm not trying to be insulting. You should not be going in a group to study the Word together without someone there to guide the study so you stay out of the ditches. You don't want to end up in a ditch. Well, Rabbi, that's very offensive and insulting because I'm sorry, but you guys have already learned wrong for most of your lives. What qualifies you now to instruct anybody, or how much value or confusion might your opinion have? If you are reading a scripture with a bunch of other friends and you share an opinion, how much value will it have, or how much confusion might it convey to somebody? Especially if they perceive you knowing more than they know, and so now they're going to give weight to what you say. There's not enough fear in the body of teaching. There really isn't. Oh, why would we just like to come together and sit around and just talk about the Word? But are you qualified in case something is discussed that's off to the left or off to the right? Somebody needs to be in the room allowing that discussion to happen to say, hold on, time out, that's not exactly where this is supposed to be, or that's not what that really means. So it's not to say you can't do what you're talking about. But where's the supervision to keep it out of the ditch? And I use the word ditch there because the idea, the metaphor of Scripture is the blind leading the blind. They both fall into the ditch. So it's not that you shouldn't get together. If you'd like to get together, just make sure there's somebody there qualified to keep everyone out of the ditch. Does that make sense? Okay? So it's not a problem. So if you wanted to have your own little study group and you wanted to have a few people in it, why don't you contact us to see if there's anybody that could sit in it too, virtually in some way, to keep you guys out of a ditch? I'm just throwing that out there, and hopefully that makes some sense. No, see, you know what the real answer is? Some of you are going to be like totally kicking against what I just said because you want to sit there and have your opinion heard, and you want to influence people, and you want that feeling of authority, and you want to feel like you're important because you're sharing and teaching. And so you don't want supervision in the room. I didn't say the supervision person's doing any teaching. They could just be sitting there simply listening in case they are needed. Is that clear? Is that fair? But some of you are going to be kicking up against that because that just totally goes against, there's a pride ego thing that you want to teach. You want to be the one that's looked to as being smart and knowing Scripture, whatever it is. Well, that's already a wrong approach, all right? You know, when I started teaching, My wife can tell you this story. We started a small Bible study, which is a bunch of friends that felt like when we went to services, we were bored out of our minds and not getting anything out of it. So maybe we could get together and we pick a topic a week in advance and we'd all show up and share what we learned. Kind of like what you guys are talking about doing, right? Let's all just get together and talk about Scripture. You know what happened? Went around the room, 5 or 8 people we had, and nobody wanted to share anything. And I always went last, and so I came to realize I should probably prepare something since it always ends up back at me anyway. Okay? But I wasn't trying to lead a study. I didn't say, let's do a study, and I was going to teach. I was going to just go last and fill in some blanks or whatever it is I thought I could do. This is my first entree into ministry, so to speak. It was just a bunch of friends sitting around like you would say, oh yeah, we just want to get together and read Scripture together. How great that would be. Well, then we had a few people decide, well, why don't we let different people choose what we're going to do on our little study? And so then all of a sudden, one person wanted to just, do this emotional ease in thing and just meditate on the word, and it all turned into very charismatic sort of a thing. And then we had another, and so the whole thing got basically derailed from where it started. Without supervision, the people turn into chaos and confusion. It goes off the rails. If you don't know that, you have not been paying attention. Paying attention to what, Rabbi? Your life. Not just you, but everybody around you. Things that are unsupervised don't generally go well. They eventually go off the rails. Yes or no? Yes or yes? Okay? All right, that was the last one, Kurt? All right. Look, I hope that was a blessing to you. All right? I enjoyed that. I especially like when we turned into group therapy again at the end there. So, all right? Are you okay, El Yada? He's good. You can come out and grab it. All right, so we're going to go ahead and have the children come on in.